The choice was not a debate. It was a surrender to a new reality. The Conclave had seen their mythic terror dismantled like a broken tool. They had also seen the faces of the beings who did it, not monsters, but creatures who looked at the end of everything and saw a problem to solve. The human, Jay, had called their nightmare a Tuesday. The word meant nothing to them, but the tone, the casual, brutal acceptance of constant struggle changed everything. They chose to stay. They chose to fight. What followed was a frantic, surreal collaboration. The human fleet became a mobile command center, hovering near the station. Conclave engineers, led by the pragmatic Ji-Ho, were ushered aboard human vessels. They saw not gleaming halls, but functional, rugged bays filled with equipment that was built to be repaired with blows from a hammer. Human engineers, speaking in short, clipped sentences, showed them how to install reinforced gravity locks and jury-rigged launch systems on the Conclave's mineral freighters in a quiet docking bay. Ji-Ho watched a human technician named Hana weld a mounting bracket with showers of sparks. "Your technology," he ventured. "It is not elegant." Hana lifted her visor, her face smudged with grime. She wasn't offended. She nodded. "Elegant breaks. This holds." She slapped the welded joint. It sounded like a bell. Ji-Ho understood. In a universe that wanted to break you, elegance was a luxury. Meanwhile, Tay worked with Min in the human ship's tactical room. Star maps, the Conclave's life's work of peaceful exploration, were overlaid with human symbols, kill zones, gravitational slingshots, radiation pockets. Min pointed to a dead star system, a place the Conclave had always marked as lifeless and void. "Here," Min said. "We fight here." Tay shook his head. "There is nothing there. No resources, no cover. It is a graveyard." "Exactly," Min replied. "No biomass for it to consume. No complex matter to replicate from except what we bring. And the stellar remnant gives us electromagnetic chaos to hide in. We picked the battlefield, not it." The logic was alien, yet irrefutable. It was not about finding a safe place. It was about creating the most dangerous place for the enemy. Sue's role was different. She became the voice between the two cultures. She sat with Jay, helping to program the Conclave freighter's simple navigation computers with human attack patterns. The freighters would not carry weapons. They would carry asteroids. Small ones fitted with crude human guidance systems. They would be the hammer, swung by the human anvil. "Your pilots?" Jay asked, her eyes on a screen full of trajectories. "Can they follow these flight paths?" "Precisely. Timing is everything." "They are not warriors," Sue said softly. "They don't need to be. They just need to be good drivers. Tell them it's a delivery. The most important delivery of all time." The main swarm arrived sooner than expected. It poured into the Ethelgerd system like a silent, gray tide, blotting out the stars. It was a mindless, hungry thing, drawn to the energy signatures of the station and the fleet. It did not attack with strategy. It simply advanced, a wave of dissolution. The human fleet moved. They did not form a pretty defensive line. They shot outwards, away from the station, towards the dead system Min had chosen. They fired sporadic kinetic rounds into the edge of the swarm, not to destroy it, but to sting it, to pull its attention. Like anglers hooking a great, stupid fish, they led the devourer away from the garden and into the barren wastes. The battle at the dead system was not a thing of light and glory. It was dark, cold, and brutal. The human ships, the Jeng and its sisters, positioned themselves between the swarm and the incoming Conclave freighters. They became the anvil. They unleashed everything they had: kinetic barrages, radiation pulses, nanic clouds. The gray swarm washed over them, consuming, replicating, trying to overwhelm. On the bridge of the Jeng, Min coordinated the defense, his voice calm amidst the shuddering impacts. On the station, Jay watched the tactical display, her hand on the comlink to the freighters. Sue stood beside her, translating the final order. "Now," Jay said, her voice quiet. Sue spoke to the freighters. "All pilots, execute delivery run Omega." From the shadow of a shattered planetoid, the conclave freighters emerged. They were ungainly, slow things, but they were on perfect trajectories. They flew not at the swarm, but at the space around it. As they reached their marked points, they opened their cargo bays and released their loads, dozens of small, rocky asteroids. Human guidance packs flared, nudging the rocks. It was not high science. It was basic physics, applied with vicious intent. The asteroids, caught in the dead star's weak but precise gravity, became a hailstorm of kinetic impactors. They slammed into the edges of the swarm from multiple angles. Each impact scattered and disrupted the gray goo, breaking its cohesion. The human ships, sensing the disruption, focused their fire on the chaotic gaps. They did not try to destroy the whole swarm. They shattered it into smaller, isolated clouds, which their nanites and radiation cannons could then systematically annihilate. It was messy. It was violent. It worked. The conclave watched, their hearts in their throats. They saw one human ship, a smaller escort, get caught in a tendril of the swarm. Its shields failed. The gray goo began to eat into its hull. They heard the final transmission from that ship, calm and clear. Core breach imminent. Executing final protocol. Life pods away. Good hunting. Even as the ship was consumed, a dozen tiny pods shot out, streaking towards the other human vessels. Saving the crew was part of the battle plan, even at the end. When the last of the gray swirls dissipated into harmless dust, the silence that followed was different. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of exhausted awe. A few days later, the human fleet was repaired enough to move. They gathered at the edge of the system to leave. Min and Jay came to the station one last time. They met with Sue, Tae, and Jiho in a simple room, its atmosphere set to a compromise. Min looked at them. "The Devourer is gone from this sector. Its replication seed is destroyed. You are safe." Tae bowed his head, a deep Corvi gesture of immense gratitude. "You saved us. You are our guardians." Jay shook her head. "No." The word was firm, but not unkind. "We are not guardians. We do not want your thanks, or your worship, or your fear." Min took over, his eyes earnest. "We want neighbors. The galaxy isn't a garden. It's a wilderness. We see that now more than ever. And it is easier to survive in a wilderness." He paused, "with good neighbors who watch your back." He offered a data crystal to Jiho, schematics for the kinetic launchers, and the nanite counter-agent base code. Not a gift. A trade. For your stellar maps. And for an open channel. Sue understood first. They were not leaving behind protectors. They were leaving behind knowledge. They were offering not a shield, but a tool. A way to be strong. The human ships turned towards the dark, ready to plunge back into the silent vastness. But a new relay beacon hummed to life, linking Ethelgerd to a distant point called Sol. And on the station's high-gravity docking ring, construction began on a joint research outpost. Sue volunteered to be its first conclave liaison. She now wore a reinforced suit, breathing the mixed air dot as she watched the human fleet shrink into a cluster of stars. She did not see Deathworlders. She saw Min, who calculated angles of survival. She saw Jay, who called apocalypse a Tuesday. She saw Hana, whose welds held. They saw a universe that tried to kill them. And they said no. And for the first time in 1,000 generations. The people of the garden worlds looked out at the cold, dark wilderness of space and did not feel alone. They felt, for the first time, like they might just have a chance. Panic was no longer quiet. The conclave station erupted in a chorus of terrified frequencies. The shriek of the alarm was joined by the discordant chimes of the feline, the shrill whistles of the corvi, and the pained, flashing light of the verity. The sight on the sensors was their oldest, deepest fear made real the hungry gray maw of the devourer, reaching for them at last. The instinct to flee was overwhelming, but there was nowhere to go. Their ships were slow, unarmed transports. Despair filled the gallery like a cold gas dot inside the sealed chamber. Min and Jay did not panic. They moved. Min's hand went to the side of his helmet, and he spoke, his voice tight and clear. "Command, this is Min contact. I repeat, we have contact at the system's edge. Scout pattern, designation matches provided data. Initiating Protocol Kappa." Jay was already at the chamber door, her own hand on a panel. "Conclave Control, this is Jay. You will unlock this door now." The command was absolute. In the chaos, Sue, in her translator's booth, heard her. She saw the frozen archivist alone. With a trembling hand, she overrode the door security. The heavy seals hissed, and the air from the death chamber rushed out, a warm, oxygen-rich gust that smelled strange and metallic. Min and Jay strode out, moving with that same deliberate, powerful gait. They ignored the terrified aliens around them and headed straight for the main observation gallery. The conclave delegates shrank back from their passage. As if from a walking wildfire, "Give me a direct feed to your sensor array," Jay said, not asking, as she reached a console.t. Paralyzed by dread, simply pointed a trembling wing. Jay's hands flew over the alien interface, her adaptability terrifying. In seconds, she had a tactical overlay on the main screen. 5 gray, amorphous blobs were moving in a search pattern, heading inexorably toward the station. "They've seen us," Min said, his eyes scanning the data. "Their energy profile is spiking. Replication cycle initiating. We cannot fight." Elone pulsed, his light a frantic strobe. We must scatter. Distress calls." "Your distress calls would be a dinner bell," Min said flatly. He turned from the screen. "Jay, you have control. I'm heading to the gen. We'll be the anvil." "Understood. I'll coordinate from here. Get me those freighters." Jay looked at the stunned conclave. Her gaze settled on Ji-Ho, the engineer. "You, the freighters on your outer docking ring. Are they space-worthy? Can they move?" Ji-Ho, a Soren, blinked his large eyes. "Why, yes. But they are not armed. They are for hauling mineral slurry. We don't need them armed. We need them mobile, and we need their cargo bays." Her eyes swept the room, landing on Sue, who had just entered the gallery. "You, translator, stay with me. I need you to relay precise instructions to your pilots. No hesitation. You understand?" Sue, her leaves a stark white with fear, could only nod. Min was already gone, sprinting down a corridor toward the docking ring with a speed that seemed impossible in the station's gentle gravity. Outside the viewport, the human fleet, which had been hanging silent, came alive. Lights blazed across their jagged hulls. Engines glowed with a fierce, blue-white fury that scorched the sensors. The 5 gray scouts shifted, orienting towards this new, bright source of energy. They began to accelerate. What happened next was not a battle in the way the Conclave understood battles. They knew of energy weapons, precise beams of light or plasma. What the humans used was brute force physics. The lead human ship, the one Min was presumably on, fired no colorful beams. There was a dull, shuddering thump that vibrated through the station structure. A moment later, one of the gray scouts simply disintegrated. It didn't explode. It came apart into a cloud of inert, shredded fragments. What? What was that? Tay whispered, his sensors trying to make sense of it. Kinetic kill projectile, Jay said, her fingers flying over a separate human comms unit. Tungsten rod. Very fast. Very simple. Another thump. Another scout vanished into dust. The remaining 3 scouts swarmed, moving with eerie, fluid coordination. They fired tendrils of the gray goo substance, which splattered against the human ship's shields. The shields didn't shimmer prettily. They sparked and crackled, violently repelling the matter on a molecular level. The human ship didn't flinch. It rotated with a startling agility and unleashed a focused pulse of radiation so specific and powerful it made the viewport filters darken. The 3rd scout seemed to freeze, then its structure destabilized, melting into a useless, inactive puddle. The last 2 scouts tried to close in, to overwhelm with sheer mass. From the flanks of the human fleet, smaller vessels darted forward. They launched canisters that burst not with explosives, but with a silvery mist. Where the mist touched the gray goo, it ceased moving. The replication signal jammed by a counteragent NANITE. It was over in minutes. The silent, galaxy-devouring horror was reduced to floating debris and inert sludge. The human fleet powered down its weapons, the glow of their engines settling back to a watchful hum. The station was utterly silent, save for the quiet sobs of relief from a few delegates. Jay let out a slow breath and turned to the conclave. Their faces were a picture of stunned, disbelieving awe. They had just seen their unthinkable nightmare dismantled with chilling mechanical efficiency. Sue finally found her voice. How? How did you do that? You didn't seem afraid. Jay looked at her, then at the others, at Elone's pulsing, confused light, at Tay's wide eyes, at Jiho's look of technical fascination. She gestured to the viewport, to the brutal human ships hanging against the stars. You look at the universe, she said, her voice calm but ringing in the quiet gallery. And you see a garden that has turned dangerous. You hide in the last safe corner. We look at the universe. She paused, as if searching for the right words in the simple code. We see a wilderness that has always tried to kill us. Our air is poison until you are strong enough to breathe it. Our gravity is a weight that bends your bones until they are hard enough to bear it. Every other life form on our world is a competitor, a predator, or both. She pointed a thumb at the screen, showing the dissipating gray cloud. That? A self-replicating swarm that eats planets? For the first time, something like a hard, dry smile touched her lips. Where we come from, we call that a Tuesday. Min's voice crackled over Jay's unit, loud enough for all to hear. Scout threat neutralized. But the main swarm will have detected the engagement. It will be coming. We have days, maybe hours. Jay nodded, looking at the gathered aliens not with pity, but with a stark, unwavering directness. You have 2 choices. You can run again. Maybe you'll find another corner for a while. Or, she said, her gaze sweeping over them, you can give us your maps, your ships, and your trust, and we will show you how to fight back. The question hung in the toxic, heavy air of the sealed chamber. What are you running from? In the observation gallery, a wave of visible discomfort passed through the conclave delegates. The Thaleen chimed softly. The Verity's lights dimmed. Tay's feathers lay flat against his body. The truth was a shadow they had been fleeing for centuries. A nightmare they had almost convinced themselves was a dream. Elone, the archivist, pulsed a dim, sorrowful gray. Through the speakers, his translated voice was soft. We are not running. We are preserving. Inside the chamber, Min and Jay exchanged a glance. It was a quick, wordless communication. Sue, watching from her translator's booth, saw it. It was not confusion. It was recognition. They had heard evasions before. You stopped all broadcasts, Jay stated, her tone leaving no room for argument. You hid. This is a tactical withdrawal. You have an enemy. The silence from the conclave was answer enough. Elone's light flickered, a sign of deep distress. Finally, Tay stepped forward to the observation window, speaking so Min and Jay could see him. We have a theory, a historical record, of a phenomenon. Describe it, Min said. Not a request. An order born of necessity. Tay began to speak, his avian voice trilling with remembered fear. He described the records, passed down from refugees. He spoke of a wave of gray that swallowed star systems not with fire, but with a terrible silent consumption. It was not a fleet, but a swarm. A self-replicating biomechanical plague. It broke down complex matter at the molecular level ships, stations, cities, people, and used the raw material to make more of itself. It left behind only dust and silence. They called it the Devourer. It moved through the galactic arm adjacent to this one, over 300 standard cycles ago, Tay said, his eyes wide. Our ancestors fled ahead of its path. We came here, to this quiet edge, and we hoped. We prayed it had not followed, that it was done. And the silence? Jay pressed. A precaution, Elone answered, his light pulsing weakly. A theory proposed by our scientists. If the Devourer uses broad-spectrum emissions to locate prey, then to be silent is to be invisible. We shut everything off. We became ghosts in the hope it would pass us by. In the chamber, Min had pulled a small, flat device from his suit. His thick fingers moved over it. You have visual records? Sensor data from the encounters? After a hesitant moment, Tay nodded to the archivists. A data stream was sent to the chamber screen and to the observation gallery. Grainy, horrific images flickered to life. A Thaline world, its beautiful crystal cities shimmering under a sun. Then, a blurry shadow falling across the planet. The transmission showed the view from a fleeing ship. The planet below seemed to melt, not into lava, but into a swirling, formless gray paste that spread like a virus across continents. The image dissolved into static. Another record. A Verity forest world, its great bioluminescent trees glowing in the twilight. The gray swarm touched down. The light of the trees winked out, not in an instant, but in a wave, as if a vast, dark blanket was being drawn over the world. The silence from the record was the worst part. Sue watched the images. A deep-rooted terror she had only known from history lessons, now feeling fresh and cold. She then looked at the humans. They were studying the footage, their faces lit by the ghastly glow. Min zoomed in on the edge of the swarm, analyzing its movement pattern. Jay watched the consumption rate, her lips moving silently as she calculated. Their expressions were not of terror, not of the soul-crushing dread that gripped the conclave. Their faces were set, focused. They looked like engineers studying a broken machine, or soldiers assessing a threat. When the last record ended, the chamber was quiet. Min put his device away. He looked first at Jay, then up towards where he knew the conclave leaders were watching. We have a similar classification, Jay said, her voice cutting through the quiet. We call them exterminator-class threats. Self-replicating, non-bargaining, consume all biomass and structured matter. The conclave stared. They had given a name to their ultimate nightmare. These humans had a classification for it. Your ancestors' response was flight, Min said. There was no accusation in it, just a statement of fact. A logical choice. Preserve the species. It worked for a time. It is the only choice. Elone pulsed, his light flaring. You cannot fight such a thing. It is like fighting the tide. It has no mind to reason with, no heart to strike. It is a force of nature. Jay's head tilted. On Earth, she said, her words simple and heavy, forces of nature are things we build walls against, or divert, or harness. She gestured to the screen, now dark. This is a problem of engineering, and of applied force. Tay shook his head, a very human gesture he had picked up from old broadcasts. You do not understand the scale. It consumes worlds. Your ships, as impressive as they are, would be swallowed like dust. Min met his gaze through the layers of crystal and metal. My people have a saying, he said, his calm voice somehow carrying more weight than a shout. Running works until you run out of galaxy. Then you die tired. The words landed like a physical blow. They articulated the unspoken fear that haunted every conclave sleep cycle. They were at the edge. There was nowhere left to run. What are you proposing? Sue found herself asking, her voice small in her booth. First, we need your complete stellar maps, Min said. Every system between here and the last known Devourer location. Then, we need to see your defensive capabilities. We have no offensive capabilities, Geo. The engineer said over the comms, his voice tight with shame. Defensive. Then, Jay corrected, without missing a beat. Shields, sensors, propulsion. What you have. The conclave was reeling. The humans were not reacting with fear. They were planning. They were asking for maps. It was insane. It was. Before anyone could formulate a response, a different, sharper alarm ripped through the station. It was not the deep thrum of the humans' arrival. It was a high, piercing shriek of proximity and violation. On the main gallery viewer, the starfield was replaced by frantic sensor data. At the edge of the Ethelgerd system, space itself was unraveling. Background radiation spiked. Small, dense objects were blinking into reality. Their signatures a perfect, horrifying match for the gray scouts in the historical records. Tay stared at the screen, his beak open in a silent cry of despair. A single word escaped him, translated and broadcast to everyone, including the humans in their sealed box. Scouts. The Devourer was not a forgotten nightmare. It was here. It had found the ghosts, and the conclave had run out of galaxy. Panic was a quiet thing in the conclave. There were no screams. Instead, the great chamber filled with a low hum of distress frequencies, the clinking of crystalline bodies trembling, and the soft rustle of Verity leaves curling in on themselves for protection. The viewport still showed the silent, menacing fleet. The data packet from the so-called Deathworlders was a cold, hard fact on every screen. The senior archivist, a being of shimmering light known as Elone, pulsed a steady, calming azure. It was a learned signal, not a felt one. We must deliberate. We must understand their intent. Tay, the Corvi astronomer, found his voice first. His feathers were still puffed, but his eyes were sharp. Their intent is clear. They provided a list of lethal conditions and asked us to build them a room. It is a trap, or a test. We should not engage. We should maintain silence. Perhaps they will grow bored and leave. A murmur of agreement came from many delegates. The strategy of the conclave had always been patience, avoidance. Let the storm pass by. Sue, however, stared at the last line of the transmission. Awaiting acknowledgement, it was not a request open for debate. It was a statement of what would happen next. She thought of the brute force arrival, the sheer power of the ships. Respected archivist, she said, her voice softer than the rustle of leaves. They are not asking for a vote. They are telling us the parameters of the meeting. If we do not provide this environment, they may decide to come and get it. The idea was worse than the first. The thought of those beings who breathed poison and carried crushing gravity with them. Walking the gentle corridors of Ethelgerd Prime was a vision of pure destruction. They would not need weapons. Their mere presence would be a plague. The linguist is correct, chimed the Thaline elder, its crystalline form catching the light. We cannot have them here, but we cannot meet on their terms on their ships. It is a puzzle. Then we build their room, said a new voice. It was Ji-Ho, a senior engineer from the mammalian Soren, a species of quiet pragmatists. He had been studying the specs. It is not a puzzle. It is an engineering challenge. We build a sealed chamber in the zero-G docking ring. We can reinforce it, control the atmosphere, adjust the gravity plating to their terrible specifications. We make it a box. If they are hostile, we can eject the entire module into space. The idea had a cruel logic. A prison disguised as a meeting room. The conclave, after much nervous discussion, agreed. It was the only path that did not involve immediate invasion or certain death. A flurry of activity began. While the engineers like Ji-Ho worked with frantic speed, Sue and Tae were tasked with preparing a response. They crafted a careful message, acknowledging the request, providing coordinates for the docking ring, and promising a suitable environment. They sent it on the same crude radio band. The response was immediate. A single word, broadcast back, acknowledged. 2 days later, the chamber was ready. It was a stark, gray cube of reinforced metal, isolated at the end of a long, transparent transit tube. Inside, the air was a toxic mix of high-pressure oxygen. The gravity plates hummed at a crushing 1G. To the conclave, looking in from the safe side of the thick crystal viewport, it looked like a death trap. Everyone who could fit was in the observation gallery. Elone pulsed with anxious silver light. Tae stood rigid. Ji-Ho monitored the environmental controls from a safe distance. Sue was not with them. She had volunteered to act as translator from a sealed booth just outside the chamber door. It had its own separate life support. She would be closer than anyone else. It was her duty, she said. Her leaves were a pale, nervous yellow. A single shuttle detached from the massive carrier. It was as ugly as the rest, a slab of armor with engines. It moved with a quiet, precise menace into the docking ring. The clamps engaged. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the outer airlock cycled. Inner doors opened on the conclave side, revealing the transit tube. 2 figures stepped out from the shuttle airlock. Sue's breath caught. They were humanoid, but that was where any familiarity ended. They were dense. Their movements were not graceful, but efficient, each step deliberate and solid, as if they were constantly holding back a great weight. They wore suits of a simple, tough-looking gray material, but their heads were bare. They exposed their faces to the artificial environment without fear. One was male, with short, dark hair and eyes that scanned the transit tube, the door, the structure of the ring itself. His gaze was not fearful, but assessing, calculating load-bearing points and angles of cover. The other was female, her hair tied back, her expression calm but alert. Her eyes found the observation gallery, and for a second, she looked directly at the gathered aliens. There was no smile, no wave, just an acknowledgement, a cataloging. They walked down the tube. They did not float or glide. They walked, their boots connecting with the floor with a firmness that seemed aggressive in a low-gravity context. They reached the heavy door to the sealed chamber. A light on Sue's panel turned green. The environment was a match. With a hiss, the door slid open. The 2 visitors stepped inside. The door sealed behind them. They were in the box. Sue took a shaky breath. Her microphone was open to the chamber. She had practiced the greeting 100 times. Beings of the distant fleet. She began, her voice amplified, translated into the simple code they used. Welcome to the Grand Conclave of Ethelgard Prime. We greet you in a spirit of peace and curiosity. We have provided the environment you requested. Please state your designation and your purpose here. Inside the chamber, the two figures stood, seemingly relaxed in the crushing toxic air. They looked at the walls, the ceiling, the single communication screen that showed Sue's face. The male glanced at the female. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. He stepped forward. His voice, when it came through the speakers, was calm, flat. It was translated not by Sue, but by a crude but effective AI that parsed his words from the radio signal he sent back. "I am Min," he said. "This is Jay. We are from Sol System, the third planet, Earth." He paused, as if the name should mean something. It did not. The Conclave databases had no record of a soul in this galactic region. "We have monitored your broadband cultural and scientific transmissions for approximately 6 of our decades," Min continued. His tone was that of a report. "Your signals were a constant in our early stellar listening posts. They spoke of art, philosophy, stellar cartography. A peaceful coalition." Sue felt a flutter of hope. They were listeners. Scholars, perhaps. "Then, 3 of our years ago," Jay said, taking over. Her voice was clearer, sharper. "The transmission stopped. Not just from one world. From all of you. Every channel. Total silence." Min's dark eyes looked directly into the pickup, as if he could see through it to the heart of the conclave. "A great silence is a known phenomenon. It is never good. We traced the last vectors of your broadcasts. We followed. It was a long journey." He let that hang in the heavy air. They had crossed an unimaginable distance, not for trade or conquest, but because the conclave had gone quiet. "We are not a warrior people," Elone pulsed. His words translated and fed into the chamber by Sue. "We observed that," Jay said, and there was no judgment in it, just fact. Min finished the thought, his next question dropping into the silent chamber like a stone into a still pond. "So we came to find out why you stopped talking. We are here to ask, what are you running from?" The air in the Grand Conclave chamber was always perfect. It smelled faintly of sweet pollen and calm water. Sue, a xenolinguist from the Verity people, let her delicate leaf-like fingers drift through the beam of soft blue light. She was translating a gentle poem about star cycles from the Corviavians. Around her, the representatives of a dozen species glimmered, floated, or stood with serene stillness. No one raised their voice. No one needed to. They were all from Garden World's planets of mild weather, gentle gravity, and no great predators. Conflict was a thing discussed in historical archives, not lived. Her colleague, Tay, a Corvi with sleek gray feathers and intelligent black eyes, tilted his head. "The nuance in the third stanza is not longing, but patient anticipation," he whispered, his voice a soft trill. Sue nodded, making the mental note. This was their universe. A place of quiet conversation, art, and slow, careful science. They monitored the galaxy from their perfect, safe station, orbiting Ethelgard Prime, a star known for its stable, kind light. The alarm that shattered the peace was not a sound, but a feeling. A deep, subsonatic thrum that vibrated through the deck plates and into the very bones, or their equivalent, of every being present. The great crystal viewport, which usually showed a peaceful starfield, suddenly darkened. Not with shadow, but with sheer, blunt-mass dot ships. Dozens of them. They had not arrived via the elegant, ripple-free jumps of conclave vessels. They tore into reality with a violent, screeching tear in space that bled chaotic energy. The ships themselves were angular, unsymmetrical, and covered in thick armored plates that were scarred and pitted. They looked less built and more forged in some violent place. They blotted out the stars like a wall of jagged metal. Panic, a rare and terrifying emotion, loomed in the chamber. The Verity delegate's bioluminescence flashed in distress patterns. The crystalline thelene chimed in discordant tones. Tay's feathers puffed out, making him look twice his size. Identify them. Hail them. The senior archivist, a being of shimmering gas and light, pulsed with anxiety. Sue stumbled to a communication panel, her thin limbs trembling. She sent the universal greeting packet, a series of mathematical primes, peaceful intentions, and a map of safe docking ports. The packet vanished into the void. No response. She sent it again. Nothing. The unknown fleet moved. It did not approach with caution. It moved with a terrifying, silent purpose, like a predator circling. Their formation was tight, tactical. Scans returned insane data. The radiation leaking from their drives was in lethal spectra. The power signatures from their cold, dormant engines were magnitudes greater than anything the Conclave possessed. And the composition of their hulls. It was layered with absurdly dense metals. They are ignoring every protocol, Tay said, his voice tight. They are. They are looking at us. Like we are data points. The archivist pulsed a soft, fearful gold. Prepare the defense satellites. The order was given, but everyone knew it was useless. Their defense systems were designed to nudge away asteroids or disable the engines of reckless miners. They were not made for this. Then the fleet stopped. They arranged themselves in a complex, overlapping formation around one large, especially brutal-looking carrier vessel. It was a fortress of a ship. A hatch on its side, large enough to swallow a Conclave frigate whole, began to open. A deep, black maw greeted them. Silence. The Conclave held its breath. What horrors would emerge? A swarm of drones? A beam of annihilation? Nothing came out. Instead, every speaker, every comms panel, every personal device in the Conclave chimed with the same crude, omnidirectional radio signal. It was a shockingly simple transmission, the kind their species used in their earliest pre-history. Sue, as the chief linguist, was handed the raw data. She expected a message, a declaration, a threat, a demand. It was none of those things. It was a biological and technical data packet. She parsed it, her mind translating the brute code. Her delicate green skin paled to a sickly yellow. What is it? Tay asked, peering over her shoulder. What do they say? Sue's voice was a whisper of disbelief. They are not saying anything. They are telling us what they are. She put the data on the main viewer. The entire Conclave saw it. Atmospheric requirements for standard breathing. Nitrogen 78%, oxygen 21%, trace gases 1%. Pressure 101.3 kPa. Note: atmospheric composition is non-negotiable. Oxygen levels below 19% induce hypoxia. Levels above 23% increase combustion risk. A murmur of horror went through the chamber. Oxygen was a dangerous reactive toxin. Their own atmosphere contained less than 12%. More than that required filter masks. These beings breathed it. Surface gravity for comfort. 1 standard G, 9.8 meters per second squared. Note: can tolerate operations between 0, 7G, and 1, 5G for extended periods. Short duration tolerance up to 3G with medical support. The horror deepened. Ethelgerd Prime Station gravity was set at a gentle 0, 6G for the comfort of most species. 1, 5G would be a crushing, bone-breaking prison to them. These beings considered it a comfort zone. Temperature range, comfort, 15 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius. Operational survival, RANGE, minus 40 degrees Celsius to 50 degrees Celsius with standard gear. The data went on and on. tolerance for background radiation that was orders of magnitude higher, acoustics that suggested they communicated comfortably in noise levels that would give a Corvi permanent hearing damage, biological indicators of extreme bacterial load and robust immune responses that read like a list of horrific diseases. The archivist pulsed a dim, confused violet. What is the purpose of this data? Is it a warning? A threat of biological warfare? Sue scrolled to the very end of the transmission. There, after the endless list of terrifying environmental specs, was a single line of request code. It translated to request secure. Contained docking and conference. Provide environment. Matching specifications above. Awaiting acknowledgement. The chamber was utterly silent. The truth settled over them. Cold and heavy. These were not visitors from another garden. They were not traders or lost explorers, or even conquerors in the way they understood. Tay was the one who said it aloud, his voice hollow with realization. These conditions. This isn't a list of demands. This is just what they live in. This is their normal. Sue looked from the data back to the monstrous ships hanging in the viewport, silhouetted against the kindly sun. The pieces clicked together. The dense hulls were for radiation shielding. The powerful engines were to move immense mass under high gravity. The scars were not from decoration. They aren't from a garden world, Sue breathed, the full meaning dawning on her. The galaxy has many types of planets. The rarest, the most dangerous, are Class 12. Catastrophic weather, predatory biospheres, tectonic violence. The archivist finished the thought, its light flickering with dread. Deathworlds. The word hung in the perfectly calibrated air. A deathworlder. It was a theoretical category, a nightmare used to frighten younglings. No sapient life could arise from such hellish chaos. It was impossible, yet the impossible was parked outside their door, and it had just asked, very politely, for a meeting room that matched the conditions of its horrific home. The conclave had spent millennia building a paradise of peace, and now the wilderness had come knocking, not with a roar, but with a simple, terrifying data sheet.